Alright, so in the last video, part 2, I covered connections and flows in HighByte's Intelligence Hub. Now what I wanted to do next is models and instances, but that is actually going to be in part 4 of this series. In this video, part 3, what I want to look at is something called contextualized data. I personally needed to fully grasp, to appreciate the importance of models and instances. I need to grasp contextualized data. So in the spirit of sharing my journey with you, I'm going to use this part 3 video to look at that term and what my understanding of it is and what it has to do with models and instances. So as I continue to read about articles that look at Industry 4.0, digital transformation, all that stuff, kept coming across contextualized data. And most of what it said was something like, we must add context to plant data. The plant data is not enough. It needs context, especially if it has to be sent to the cloud or databases or ERP systems, etc. All those IT type applications, right? So, anytime a fancy term comes up in Industry 4.0 or digital transformation, it's usually very abstract to me, which really does not help me at all. So I have to find a way to see the term from a practical angle. So using an example, I want to tell you about my view of context and where it comes into automation data on a practical level and how I relate it to models and instances. Alright, so let's say that I'm configuring a tag in a SCADA system. Most of us have configured a tag in a SCADA system. You want to name that tag a certain way. So let's look at an example. This is from an oil and gas system, right? So let's say I have casing pressure on a well and it's somewhere in the North Field. I would probably do something like this: NF North Field _ well 359 _ CSP for casing pressure. So what I'm doing there is I'm giving my tag a name that makes sense as opposed to calling it chicken soup. Now that's absurd, but I just want to make the point, right? So in other words, I'm saying, okay, this is casing pressure and it's located on well 359 in the North Field. I'm giving it context. So context is like data about your data value, the certain attributes about your data value which make it actually make more sense and make it more useful. That's context of data or data contextualization. So we do it when we name tags. I could change this. I could say NF _ W359 _ CSP _ PSI, which means the casing pressure is in PSI in this tag, right? So it's another attribute. So data contextualization, now that's a sort of very simplistic way of adding context to data, right? You can't use this tag name very easily when you go up to the higher levels in IT infrastructure and that sort of thing. So and there are other attributes that you want to add as well. So what I can do is have the data, instead of just a single tag, have it as a block of information, something like that, with all these different attributes. These are useful things. Yes, it's casing pressure. What's the location? What's the name? What are the units? What's the status and quality? Is it communicating? What's the timestamp of the last good update? What's the raw value? What's the scaled value? What's the range? What's the alarm thresholds? All these different things add a high degree of context to the data. It's data about the data, all right, attributes of that data point, because really and truly in the end what you're getting, the most important thing is the actual value of casing pressure in this case, but all of these things here are attributes associated, and they call that you're getting context in the data. So that's contextualized data. And what models and instances do is allow you to very easily create these data structures. So instead of having a single data point, you have this sort of data structure, and one of the things happens to be the value of the data point. Okay, now models do much more than that. Models in HighByte's Intelligence Hub create hierarchical data of data points and objects and machines and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, it's about modeling the data in such a way such that it can be consistently fed into different systems and it has enough meaning around it by having all of these attributes here. So that's the importance of it. So what's the big deal with models and instances? Well, you structure the data with all of the attributes in a hierarchical fashion, and what it does, it allows you to push that data very easily to various systems, so whether when you perform the data analysis on it or use it for other ways, it's actually useful. So for instance, I could have an attribute here which might be color of the well, which makes absolutely no sense. How does knowing the color of the well, where the casing pressure is from, help in data analysis? It doesn't, right? So it's the useful attributes of that data point. Okay, so that's contextualized data. That's my understanding of it. Simplistic understanding of it, but it led me into understanding models and instances. So in part 4, we'll look at models and instances. Cool.